So firstly, I just want to thank everyone for attending today and those who are tuning in virtually, for making time for us for what I promise will be probably one of the most unfiltered conversations as part of Advertising Week. And as also a very special thank you to my two guests, two fearless, incredible women and editors. We have Lydia Dishman, Senior Editor at Fast Company, Luz Corona. Woo! And Luz Corona, Community Editor at ADWEEK. Exactly. So, I just want to take a few moments. I'll let them introduce themselves and their beats, and then we're going to get into kind of the crux of why we're here today, and that's to talk about thought leadership. What it is, what it's not, what is just contributed content, and what takes it to another level. They'll offer some thoughts and distinctions that are specific to their publications as well, and specific to how they work and operate as editors. Might be a little bit of therapy herein, in which we kind of express some frustrations, things that have worked, things that don't work. We'll make some calls to action as well, and ideally clear up some misconceptions. So Lydia, do you want to go first?
Sure. For those of you who don't know me, Lydia Dishman. I am Senior Editor of Growth and Engagement at Fast Company. That's a big mouthful of a title, which people often mistake for anything from me doing email marketing to social media to a host of other things that I've been pitched in a sales capacity, which it is none of those things. I am a journalist. I've been with Fast Company for the last 15 years in a variety of roles, and currently growth and engagement means I keep my ear to the ground, listening for where the conversation on news is going and getting people from various industries to weigh in. So I am very much an editor, no longer a writer, which is fine with me.
Hi, everyone. As the community editor at ADWEEK, I oversee our thought leadership and our op-ed section. On top of that, moderate or on panels, we do podcasts. I still write, but I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it. And yeah, that's really it.
Okay. So we figured to kind of start things off that we would provide some definitions, right? We are writers at heart. So what does thought leadership mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How is it different from what some might say is an op-ed or something like that? And I know my clients have heard me say, op-eds are rooted in opinion, thought leadership is rooted in something else, but I'd love to hear that from both of you.
Yeah, I would say the best pieces and the ones that we usually approve and go for are the ones that have the actionable insights. It's properly structured. I'm not saying it needs to be like we do have word count, but it's properly structured. It's not rambling. It's rooted in expertise, someone who can really speak on the subject, and it's not promotional. So that I would say those are the basics.
+1 to all of those things. I really believe that we are ripe for a rebrand on thought leadership, because when I hear that someone is a thought leader, I immediately, because I am a journalist and I am extremely skeptical and jaundiced, go to the place of this person has a PhD in corporate bullshit. And we need to pull away from that, because there are people who can take the 30,000-foot view based on their length of experience or just being on the ground in whatever industry. But it really needs to be more than just a conflagration of corporate jargon. It really does need to advance the conversation. And so when I'm looking at these things, I'm always thinking, advance the conversation. You will hear me say that probably ad nauseum in this. Everybody say it with me, advance the conversation. Because what it looks like to us is, like, we're not a breaking news organization. We're always sort of like a day two providing context. And so our contributed posts really are doing that same function, is providing context around something that's happening in the news. And that could be across any of our verticals. It applies to any of them. So that's where we are.
And I think that's really incredible with both how, in terms of how you each framed it, because contributed content is in addition to the regular reporting that both of your publications use. You know, I don't need to say this, everyone should be aware, editorial bandwidth is a thing. You all are strapped. I think for the most part, when you're looking for solid contributed content, solid thought leadership, you're looking for something that either couldn't be reported in that way by your own editorial team, or just for whatever reason can't be at that moment. So I do want to, again, in terms of definitions, I want to talk a little bit about the editorial process, and something that I lovingly refer to as editorial privilege. And what does that look like? Different newsrooms have different ways to frame it, but it's the idea that editors make the final call.
Yeah, Lydia, thank you.
Yes, editors make the final call. And everybody works differently. I mean, I am representing my publication, but I am just one person. There are other editors on the team who do take contributed content. That said, I'm taking the bulk of it. So what you're getting is just my personal opinion on this. But yeah, I think I like to see an entire piece, because there is sometimes, and I'll say more often than not, which is a lot, sometimes there's a nugget in there that can spin into a whole other piece. So for example, I mean, we've all heard about AI taking our jobs. I mean, who's really done with that? But sometimes I'll get a piece, it'll be a fully fledged draft, great, and there'll be one sentence or one paragraph that advances the conversation. So I'll take that and go back to whomever submitted it to me and say, let's look at this a little bit more deeply. What can we do with this? And so that is part of the privilege. The other part of it is that person may take it away, write a whole different article, and it still doesn't work. And at that point, we just have to say, you know what? It's just not there. You know, come back to me with something else at another time. We also reserve the right to change headlines. We reserve the right to change subtitles, and we reserve the right to edit within. I like to preserve an author's voice. I think that's really, really important. But I also know that some people, even though they're voicey, you know, they make very common grammatical errors. That's got to be fixed. So.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think if there's ever a piece where we feel like there's going to have to be extensive edits made, you know, because of bandwidth, we kind of limit it to 2 rounds of revisions. And there have been pieces where there's multiple rounds and we had to kind of put an end to it. But also, it's a detriment to the author. You know, you don't want to, like Lydia said, you don't want to dilute the voice. And we tell them that too. You know, you can try to fit it into the ADWEEK mold, but you can also try to shop it around to other outlets so that your own voice doesn't get lost just to fit our publication. So that's one thing that we do. So we have a portal because our inboxes are just insane. So we have like a submission form. People submit there, and actually it's funny because I prefer the opposite. I prefer only an abstract or an outline. And we look at it the same way. Sometimes I think outlines work the best, just like a few bullets. But sometimes there'll be something in there and be like, actually, the 4th bullet is really interesting and something we really haven't heard before. The other 3 things we've, you know, exhausted. But there's something in there. Would you mind? And 9 times out of 10, people are like, yeah, I can do that. And those are always the best kind of pieces. So there's that. So you submit through the portal. Will Russo, my colleague at ADWEEK, he reviews that inbox consistently. I know, and it's so funny, you asked me before this, you're like, do you guys check that? And I promise you we do. And it's actually better because it all goes to the same place and we can check it there and we can kind of like flag it, like, yes, this, and we categorize, this is in this beat, this is across this beat. Sometimes we encourage people, don't email us directly, please. I cannot press delete fast enough.
See, this is a therapy part of the session.
But it's a little tricky, right? Because we have relationships with some of these PR people after a while, some of these PR groups, and after you meet them face to face, you form that relationship. So if I see Daniel from Propeller come up on my inbox, he knows what kind of pitches we're looking for, and he knows what we've turned away. So people get it after a while, and those are the ones I kind of like skim, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll move forward with this, or no, sorry. But it depends, it's all about who you know, I guess, unfortunately. But it really does depend if you have a relationship with us already, have written for us before, because we know that you get it and you know what we're looking for.
So I think that relationship piece is really important, and it's not just with the editors and the reporters, it's with the publications themselves, right? So you need to, if you are hoping to write for either of these publications or any other trade publication, you need to consume what they are putting out. You need to familiarize yourselves with what they're talking about, right? Often I always say, is there a rebuttal in there? Did you see them cover something one way? Did you notice a void? Did you notice a gap? What Lydia is talking about in terms of advancing the conversation is, can you, as a thought leader, budding thought leader, whatever it might be, can you zone in and find that editorial insight that maybe they're also having? And can you tap into that, right? So, talk to us about, like, I'm sure you get a fair number of pitches where you can tell that no one's read your public. No one's subscribing, whatever it might be. All right, Lydia, it's resonating. Take it away.
Yeah. Not naming names, but someone pitched me an opinion piece. I want to introduce you to so-and-so, big-time executive, only woman in her field doing XYZ thing. Well, let me tell you a little something. Back in 2014, I profiled this person, and I have covered them all the way through, and now I have a relationship directly with them to get pieces in. So whoever this was, maybe there was it was a bad day, there was an extreme lapse in judgment, but really start with Google. Dear Dr. Google, has Fast Company ever published my client? And just see what happens. Yes. It seems like table stakes to know like what someone has already covered and how they've covered it, so that you can come in with something really smart, like, oh, this female executive has this particular thing to say that she has not said before to any other publication, and that makes it work.
Yeah, that's the scoop, right? That's the fresh thing, again, advancing the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, no, same thing. I think we can definitely tell when people don't read ADWEEK. A lot of emails I get are to promote like a big toy coming out or something going out, and I'm like, this is not, I don't think this is what you think it is. And so we say that, but also, yeah, that's what I would really say about thought leadership.
Yeah, just do your homework and find that angle. And perhaps, someone is adjacent to someone that we've already tapped as a thought leader. God, that makes my head hurt. But it really bears looking and seeing what you can add to that conversation. So.
Yeah, to add on, I always recommend to people to see what's trending on our site, right on the ADWEEK homepage, or I feel like most publications have this, you see the top 5 to 10 articles performing. So you can kind of see what our audience is also reading and what's really resonating with them. And if there's a piece that's been trending for days and there's follow-up articles, obviously there's a lot to surround there, so maybe a great voice piece could also accompany that and complement it.
So I think that's a great point in which we should kind of dig into that a little bit more. Are you looking for timely? Are you looking for evergreen? Should we be tapping into current whatever, moments, these kinds of things? Like, what appetite do you have with your readership for either what we would call the evergreen, you could run it today and you could run it 2 months from now and same kind of pickup, versus the thing that's more of the now, right?
All the things.
All the things.
All the things, yeah.
It's funny, right now we're in the midst of re-strategizing for voice, and I would say the timely pieces are the ones that do the best, but it can't just add to the noise. Like, it has to be a thought leadership piece. It has to be like, okay, this is what I see, but it's not about your 25 years in the industry, you know, but it's like, this is what I see and this is what I think and here's what we can learn from this. Those are like the pieces that, you know, do the best. I'm so sad to say it, but we had a voice piece on Haktua, that whole thing, and it was trending. But it was a piece from Christina Garnett, and she said, here's how you know when to not jump on a trend. So, you know, and that, you know, we worked with the headline, and I knew she understands like what we're looking for, and she gave great advice in there, like, you probably shouldn't jump on this, you know, or something like that. So the timely pieces are what's working, and I think we're probably going to lean more towards that. We have evergreen pieces, but what we tell people is, like, right now we're looking at scheduling it for, you know, in X amount of weeks, pending any timely pieces that come in, and pieces will get pushed for weeks and weeks, and it's unfortunate. And we ask people, you know, if you want to shop this, if you want to take it to another outlet, that's fine too, because we don't want to just hold on to it for you. So that's kind of what we're doing now. And I think personal essays, we're leaning more towards a little bit. But again, not adding to the noise and not rambling, like really speaking about a lived experience that can benefit your work in the industry.
So let's talk about that a little bit more in terms of how to cut through, and also who makes for a good thought leader, right? So one of the things that we were talking about is it's not necessarily someone in C-suite. Certainly not salesy, right? You can't sell your product, your business, whatever it might be. It needs to be about the industry in some space. So you want to dig into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the CEO is fine. I mean, they're certainly the face of the organization. And, you know, we had a great deal of success with a POV that we published from the CEO of Grove Collaborative last year. And the reason why it worked was because Jeff was talking about how he looks at reducing plastic every day at home. And so that was really sort of phenomenal advice just for the average reader. It didn't, I mean, obviously their whole business model is about reducing plastic. But at the same time, when you think about that in a business sense, you're kind of here. But when you're thinking about, well, gee, what can I do? You know, that was a whole other level of piece. And it was great that it came from him. But we certainly have had our share of, you know, other people in the C-suite, middle managers as well. We talked about that, you know, earlier offline. But I also think, too, is really important to keep in mind, I get a lot of pitches from people who are telling me that their CTO has the solution for making a digital transformation. And my head caves in every time I see that. Because it's like, no one's really cracked the code on that. You just know what you're doing at your company, which is fine. And if it does have some seriously actionable advice that I haven't seen before, then I'm more than happy to take it. But I think a lot of times it's sort of the lazy way to get placement for you know, a job title that doesn't really get a lot of recognition unless it's in a trade publication. So keep that in the back of your minds when you're pitching your people, or if you are hoping to get a piece in.
Yeah, I think, you know, I was saying before, one of my favorite voice contributors is not in the C-suite at all, but it is the epitome of thought leadership. If you Google ADWEEK Jen Kling, she is, you know, does consultancy work, but there's a natural curiosity there, obviously for the line of work that she chose, consulting and advertising, you know, but there's a natural curiosity there. There's years of experience, and those are the pieces that really, like, she just wrote about the Athlos event, and Alexis Ohanian just shared it, you know? So those are the pieces that really resonate. Sometimes, you know, I remember sometimes we'll get pieces from CEOs, CMOs, and it's just touting their clients. And it's like, it gets complicated because they're a CEO of whatever agency, but it's not like to sell your product or sell your clients. One piece that I'm thinking of that actually works from C-suite is, we haven't published it yet, but it is someone in the C-suite who talks about making a case for why you should stay at your company, and these are the benefits. But I think what I really like about that piece is that he's genuine and also says, look, it's not perfect, and you may find a reason to go to another, but here are the benefits of staying in your company. So I think when these thought leaders in the C-suite or higher up, when they can get real and authentic and kind of minimize all those buzzwords and the jargon that you would put on your website to sell your product, that's when it really gets real.
And that's what we were talking about this earlier too, is like how much of you as a thought leader gets woven into your piece. Like how vulnerable should you be, can you be, do you want to be even, right? And I think, where we net it out is sometimes it really works.
It totally does. And oftentimes we'll be in an editorial ideas meeting and we'll have something that's newsy, and the call out will be, well, Lydia, who do we have to write a POV on this? Because that first person piece really resonates with readers. I've been through this thing, and here's what I learned. I mean, one of the pieces that we had recently was, I was the ambassador for our company's culture, and then I got fired. And that was a really interesting take on, here you are being a cheerleader, and you too are vulnerable to a layoff. And so it's helpful for people to see that, especially in troubling times, because well, what do you do next?
And so often when you work with PR agency, you only want to talk about the successes, right? You want to champion the big things. You don't want to admit that, well, maybe you're in a better place now, but you know what? The last 2 years were hell, right? Or you made a mistake, or you did something wrong, or you figured out 5 ways to not get your workplace culture where you wanted it to be, and maybe you're sort of figuring it out now. And that's a place where, as a thought leadership coach, like we kind of want to, because if you're going through it, others are going through it too, right? But it takes a certain sense of self and perhaps confidence even to be able to say like, well, actually, this is how I got it wrong. This is how we got it wrong.
You got to get it past the attorneys too, right?
Yeah, there you go.
That's the fun part.
But yeah, I mean, I do think that that's really valuable information, and it also helps because if we are really going to stand behind this notion of failure is a good thing, you can learn from your mistakes, then let it happen and be vocal about it, because other people will learn from your mistake as well. And it can only be a good thing, paying it forward.
When we were talking about what resonates and kind of the stories, obviously relationships that you have with some of your, your contributing content providers, and anecdotes of people reaching out to you because they saw something, that you made possible, right, as an editor. I think it's that kind of feedback channel, and you see what people are seeking. Lydia's the first one to tell me like, nope, too agency focused, sorry, right? But like, even we get it wrong, right? We don't always have the exact right lens at that moment, or we're not approaching something, we need to pull out, go bigger, we need to zoom in further, right? Like there is that editorial conversation that's happening, right, when we pitch, right? We're trying to find what is the nugget to advance the conversation, not just lend ourselves, another voice into the echo chamber, right? Which really frustrates, I'm sure.
Well, it does, and it's a bandwidth issue for sure, because as responsive as I like to be, sometimes I cannot give you feedback, because if I sent feedback to everybody who was pitching me all day long, then I wouldn't have time to actually edit and get stories in the pipeline. But that said, I really do think that it is valuable to have those conversations. So if there is a smooch of time that I can make to say, this doesn't work, but this might, then the ROI is for me as well. And that's why I try to respond to everybody, because I used to get, my inbox was out of control too. And a lot of the stuff I was getting was just not anything that I would ever touch at all. And so it really worked for me to say to those people who were just completely like not in the zone, this is really not for me. Maybe you should try somebody else, and then get them off of the, the constant, like they're on my distribution list, like, so I'm just gonna send to them. No.
Yeah. Sometimes we'll get really great pieces and they have nothing to do with advertising. And those, and I'll respond and be like, this is really cool, but I'm so sorry we cannot run it. Those are sometimes like that happens. I want to be like you. I actually want to be able to respond to people because we don't. The submission form, we even say once you submit, there's no guarantee you're going to hear back because of the influx, and that's amazing that you respond most of the time. But again, if it's someone who reaches out directly, then I'll be like, yes, no, and they know like my style of writing, like we can't do this, thanks. But so there's that. Something we've been trying recently, and I think it's kind of working because it's what it is, right? You try different things to see what's working and evolving with the time. So recently we are doing voice in the form of an as told to. So an example would be and those are the ones that I'm writing. And I'll just sit with someone. Sometimes we'll get a pitch. Our last piece was from Erica Coates, who was president at Motion. And the only reason I'm going to talk about is the piece did really well. She originally pitched a piece about addressing burnout in the ad agency world, especially when you're a working mom. But the piece itself, it was great writing and everything, but I was like, I don't think it's gonna drive home what you really wanna drive home. So how about we do this in the form of as told to? Got on the phone with her, 45 minutes, and I said to her, I'm like, tell me what you do from the moment you open your eyes to the moment that your head is back on the pillow. And it's like 3 paragraphs, just like, okay, I wake up at 6, I do my devotion, and that drives home the point to the point where someone, I think it even inspired someone to do a video of their day in the life as a working mom in the ad industry. So that worked. So that's something that we're trying, that sometimes like a pitch, even if you don't hear back, we might save it for a while and then reach out a couple months later and be like, are you still interested in working with us maybe in this capacity?
Sometimes the moment isn't there, right? Or the bandwidth isn't there. I do want to talk about this a little bit. Again, you've heard me say, we need to support, we need to engage, we need to consume media. Part of that, you need to subscribe, right? I'm sure Luz and Lydia would say they'd love to hire more staff, right? They'd love more colleagues, right? Subscriptions matter.
Subscriptions matter. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of free content out there, and we have unfortunately backed ourselves into a corner because that was the competitive edge years ago, but it's become very clear that that is no longer a sustainable business model. People need to eat.
Yeah.
And we're out there fighting the good fight. It's a small and mighty team. And yes, we have freelancers. That is just because we can't be everywhere all over the country. But it is really important. And for Fast Company, most of it is open. But we do have the premium site. And if you want to subscribe, you will get that in addition to access to the actual print magazine, which we still do. It's kind of remarkable that there is still something that you can hold in your hand, but it really, really is important, just to the future of the business. I don't want to get political, but the Fourth Estate has its place, and it is definitely under threat, so we need to continue to support that.
Yeah.
Very mission-oriented over here.
Yeah, I feel like publishers are still trying to figure out what revenue system works, but paywalls are still very much in play. It's what we do at ADWEEK. Voice pieces, I think they're free to read for 30 days and then they go behind the paywall. But people are still figuring it out. Publishers are still figuring it out, and that's why subscriptions are so important, because it's what's, funding our paychecks.
So we've got a couple of minutes left. I love a good call to action. And then I also want to leave space for each of you to kind of express a bit of a wish list. If there is a specific kind of thought leader out there, or a specific piece, or maybe not even something that you're working on or want to work on, but there's a colleague at some point that's really chasing something. Yeah, whatever. Call to action, wish list.
So many things. I feel like don't directly pitch, please. Submit to the submission form. I promise you it does not go into the void. It does get checked. and don't ramble. Make sure that you have great advice in there in your piece.
So be very actionable.
Be very actionable, insightful. Don't just throw jargon in there.
Data?
buzzwords.
You want more data?
Want more data, statistics. We would typically ask people to link to the source or the stat because we can't contribute to the misinformation out there. Yeah, so that's what I would say.
Okay, we do have a submissions box, but I cannot attest to the fact that it gets read on regular. I used to be in charge of that, and it was really a bear because there's a lot of like chaff that goes in there. So you could pitch directly to me. That's fine. Do not call me. Do not text me, please. I am looking at email all day. I promise you I will answer. Unless I am sick or dead, you will get an answer. Oh, I should caveat that too. Sometimes we have a very healthy spam filter, so sometimes it goes away, but if you hit it the second time, it'll get through. Yeah. That said, before you pitch, and this is sort of journalism 101, I had an editor years ago that always said to me, the nut graph is not there. Tell me why I should give a shit. And really, if you're thinking about it, that's sort of like a five-sentence prospect. If you can distill what you're trying to say in 5 sentences and even write a headline, I won't use it, but it's good for the thought process to have that. Please go for that. That'll be the best advice I can give, and we need to wrap it up. Thank you, sir.
We do. One last thing. Anything wish list? I got it. All right, fine. All right.
No,
Don't call or text. I
Yeah,
think that's
Find us after. Don't call text.
Thank you.
That's part of the wish list too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Luz. This was amazing. Thank you for being yourselves.
Thank you.